Morning.
Morning.
Money, money, money. Makes the world go around, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's especially true in business. Money's the rocket fuel of business. You need money to get off the ground. You need money to grow. I got my first business loan when I was 8. I wanted to start a lawn care business in my neighborhood. And my father was an entrepreneur. So I made a deal with my dad. I would cut our grass if he would let me use his lawnmower. He would lend me the money for gas, first go-round, $25, and I would pay him back. Excuse me, it wasn't $25. Shoot, that was a long time ago. It was only $5. That bought a lot of gas back then. So my deal was that I would pay him back $1 out of the first 5 lawns that I cut, plus another 50 cents for each one. So I had to pay interest, I borrowed the money, I paid it back, and I started this little lawn care business. After college, my first business in San Francisco, I moved from North Carolina to San Francisco, was a little remodeling business. Now, I had graduated in political science. That quarter got me a cup of coffee in terms of finding a job in San Francisco, and I fell back on what I knew, which was remodeling. My alternative financing for my first business was my customers. I asked for a deposit, enough for the materials to get to the first third of the job, and then I would get, then I would receive payment at the end of that third, and that would be some for the labor and also then money for the next batch of materials that I needed. So I used alternative financing from the very beginning. For the last 20 years, nearly 20 years though, I've been helping others get their own financing through the Small Business Development Center Network. Now the SBDC, how many of you are for San Diego? Some. Outside of the state of California? Nobody, okay. But all over the country there's a network of organizations, small business development centers, and in California there's 6 regional networks that provide free consulting to businesses around financing and lots of other issues. Just about any business issue you can think of, we help to address. But financing is one of the big ones, one of the key ones. Come on in. Welcome. And there we help people put together business plans. We help them examine their business model. We help them look at alternative financing options. And then eventually we will help them perhaps direct them to some of the financing options that are available, including alternative financing. For a long time, banks have been the major option for most businesses that I've worked with in the last 20 years, and that's been, I would estimate, maybe several thousand businesses that I've helped get financing in some sort or another in the last 20 years in North Carolina. As we know, that whole world has changed. The big guys say they're open for business, and I'm sure Citibank is open for business. But the common refrain is there are not that many good deals out there. Anybody heard that before? Especially if you're in the business service providing business. The other refrain that I hear is regulators are making us be real tight with our lending practices and we can't make a whole lot of deals. Now what that's meant is that alternative financing, which has been around for a long time, has really come to the forefront of business lending. Now things will get back to normal, things will loosen up a little bit, banks will be making more loans. It's already loosening up some, but it's still tight out there. And this is something, Gustavo, I would like for you to address, if you don't mind, when we have our discussion. You know, what's happening at Citibank. So alternative financing is non-bank financing. also known as non-traditional lending, and it covers a broad range of options. from borrowing from Aunt Susie, that's an alternative, to various sorts of community financing, to very sophisticated systems of equity financing with venture capital folks or with angel investors. All of that kind of fits in the broad category of alternative financing. And our panel today represents that broad range. They're here to share a bit of information about what they're about, what they do, and also what they know. So the format is each one of them will have about 5 to 7 minutes to talk about who they are, what they do, what kind of options they offer. And then we'll have some questions. I'll sort of lead it to begin with, but I'm sure you'll have some questions as well, with the intention of finishing by 10:30 this morning. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, how many of you tried to borrow money in the last 4 years? Anybody tried? Well, then I won't ask my next question is, have you been successful? It's kind of tough out there. And are any of you business service providers? A few. Is anybody with the chamber system? Okay. So I know that you're doing what you can to help your folks. And alternative financing is something certainly to look into. Here in San Diego, there are a lot of options. And I'll share something with you at the end of the program, a little matrix that we've put together that includes some of the options that we'll hear about this morning that you might find useful and valuable. What I'd like to do is have each one of our panelists talk a little bit about what they do. Let me introduce them, if I might. But I'm also interested in having them address what I think is an interesting question, which is, where does your money come from? It might be of interest to these folks to know where some of that alternative money comes from, where it originates from. Gustavo, would you mind beginning? Gustavo Berard from Citibank, Lynn Fernandez from the Vedic Organization, Vice President of Lending, Robert Lopez from Axion, and Greg Solomon from the Interstate Business Capital Organization. Greg in the middle there. If you wouldn't mind starting and talking about what you guys are doing with the bank. I kind of think I know where your money comes from.
All the folks in the room. So we have a particular segment, since we were talking about where does the money come from some of the organizations that are around the table. We do our investments in different ways so that we can provide the panel experts here the opportunity to give dollars to all of you. Our traditional funding, as you might be aware, obviously the straight traditional loans that you come to the branch are maybe kind of like the tier where we would all want to get to eventually, right? The ones you have to get your credit worthiness, your capacity. I'll explain the polishing and brushing up that the folks over here to my left can provide you from a point of technical assistance. And I think many of the organizations here, whether it be like VEDC or Axion, we do these investments into their loan pools, which I'm going to let them address because that was your question. We also make investments on a national level, like the Calvert Foundation is an example where we've given millions of dollars, if you will, among other corporate institutions to be able to make monies into these foundations to provide additional resources of alternative funding for organizations or businesses like yourselves. Many of our lending, direct lending that Jose Sarmiento does over at City Heights is your traditional small business loans, and if they don't, for example, meet the certain initiative A criteria, then we provide what would be our second alternative would be the SBA loans, right? The guaranteed loans to the government. Or if there's obviously opportunities elsewhere, we'll do the referrals to Axion. We'll do it to VEDC. We've got, for instance, again on Friday we'll be together to be able to identify opportunities that maybe don't fit traditional banking, whether it's Citi or whether it's Wells or Chase. And then we have this network of relationships, whether they be with asset building. You'll hear from my colleagues here that we're working with our commercial banking institution department. Our community development institution would be EDC, or our small business department, or small business retail department through Acción. So these are the resources so that we can tell our clients, not necessarily, we can't lend you today because of these circumstances, but we know who can. And then we refer them over to our partners. I'm not sure specifically that was kind of the question the answer you were looking for, but we know that, as in the summary, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And we know we have a social permit, if you will, through the CRA Reinvestment Act to be able to bring monies back into the community, whether they're coming directly through us or indirectly through our partners. So that's why I'm really, again, delighted to be able to provide this and sponsor this workshop, to hear from the subject matter experts, to be able to say, okay, at least maybe it's a year or two away from the traditional lending, but let's help you today. So, without further ado.
Let me also ask, would you be available after the 10:30 time frame to answer individual questions if they have them? And I don't know, I assume we can use this room, otherwise we can migrate into the hallway if you have individual questions of these folks.
Sorry, can we wrap it up?
Sure, thanks. So, a question that's not so specific that it's going to, and involved that it might take an hour, but that might, yes ma'am.
What percentage of your portfolios are high-tech or e-commerce? And do you work with those types of?
We break down portfolio into 5 industries.
Okay.
Usually tech or e-commerce is considered professional.
Okay.
So I would say professional would be about 20% of our portfolio, 20 to 25%, no, 20%. And within that, e-commerce is one of our fastest growing business requests. Well, not specifically the industry, but for e-commerce. So we might get a quick loan for $2,000 to start a website or something like that. We do have IT companies, we do have servicing companies, so it's substantial and it's growing.
For us, it says something about 22%.
We're around that percentage also.
Does green tech fall into that same category?
Professional, yeah.
Have time for one more quick question? Yes.
For the contact information for all of the organizations, is that in the booklet or in the video?
I've got some mine here too, but
I just want to say real quick, we are going to have a loan pavilion, like Gustavo said. We have a table set up over by registration where you can sign up for the loan pavilion. It's a 20-minute consultation, either with Robert, with myself, with Citibank, or with one of our other partners, CDC. And so the appointments are going to be set up for Friday between 9:30 and 12. So if you would like.
And the first thing I do is look at my calendar.
It's a very intense program, but I found that I looked forward to being in class.
My company's National Land Equipment. We went around in a circle and introduced ourselves. It seemed like I don't know how much I'm going to have in common with these businesses and these people, and it turns out that we have so much in common, and we're really learning a lot from each other as well as from the professors.
After our orientation, I was in tears because I finally felt like I was in the room with people who cared, knew what they were doing, and were serious about it.
I came into the program thinking that I was a pretty savvy business owner. Through participation in that program, I realized I didn't know half of what I thought I knew.
Put a bunch of entrepreneurs and business owners together, and it said, let's hear what's going on in your business.
It got down to the nitty-gritty, to the weeds, if you will, of what it takes on a day-to-day basis to grow your company.
The program really makes you refocus and give you some practical skills that you can put in practice right away.
I learned that hiring the right people to help spread me out gives me more time to invest in the business operations.
I went into the program, I was hoping to get the accounting and the finance training, got that.
Branding and becoming bankable and doing a pitch. The key words was effective and being efficient and compelling all at the same time.
From the professors or even people from Goldman Sachs that were involved in the very specific segments that we were